This conference will now be recorded.
Guys, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yes, today class. Guys, we done the Spring Core, the XML configuration, Java-based configuration, annotation-based configuration, and all. Today class will start the Spring MVC, guys. So first, let me take one example about the Spring MVC without Spring Boot classes. After this completion of the Spring MVC 2-3 classes, Spring MVC, then I'll start the Spring Boot classes. That will be better. Actually, I'm planning to start the Spring Boot directly. But okay, Spring MVC, how the XML configuration is done, how the Tomcat server is configured. We will see the other example once. Then after that, we will start with what? Spring Boot will start, right? Exactly. Okay, Spring MVC. So MVC means what the full form of MVC? Model, view, and what? Controller, right? Yeah. So we need to design application. We're using what? Model, view, controller. It's up to now we are designing Spring standalone application. So directly we are writing the code, we are writing the main method. Where the main method is there, that is called standalone application. But today class what MVC, right? Model view controller. In MVC, the Spring MVC is used to design the web applications here. Spring MVC use it to what? Design the what application? Web application, right? Yeah, web application. Web application means what? The web application nothing but it's a like client server architecture application, right? The Spring MVC used to design the web application. Web application contains the client server architecture. Follows like client server architecture. Client server architecture, right? Client server architecture, guys. So the client sends a request, the server has to take the request, server has to process the request, server has to generate the response back to the client. So Spring MVC used to design what kind of applications, guys? Web applications. Web applications. Web application contains what client server architecture, and the web applications are designed using MVC architecture. If the web application is designed, tell me the web applications are what? The web applications are designed using what MVC architecture, right? That's the point, guys. So today we will see like what is the MVC architecture clearly, how the client sends a request, the request goes to which place from next to next. We will see the complete architecture. Then next class we'll start the first application. That will be better. Because you got the point, right? Yes. Guys, see here the Spring MVC. So design what kind of applications, guys? Web application, right? It follows what architecture here? MVC architecture. It implements the basic features of Spring Core framework. Definitely, to use the Spring MVC means we have to use the Spring Core data completely. Core is the heart of the application, guys. Core definitely is a very it should be very strong at the Spring Core module, right? Exactly. Now Spring MVC built on the top of the Servlet API. Okay, fine. The internally Spring MVC is using what? Servlet's concept. Solid concept, right? Exactly. Yes, MVC stands for what? Model to hold the data. Model means data. We are transferring the data between one layer to another layer. See, controller is giving the one object to the view layer. How the controller is giving the data to the view layer with the help of model data. Model in the sense hold the data. Model encapsulate the application data. Yes, model means what? Data. View means what? Presentation. Controller means what? Application flow will take care of the controller. Yes, who will take the controller? Controller will take the application flow. Controller will transfer our request to the specific services and specific repositories. Controller will transfer the flow. Model, it will transfer the data. View, it will give the response. Tell me guys what the model will control. Model means what? Data. Hold the data. So I'm holding my complete data user object. That user object will be transferred from service layer to controller layer to view layer. How the data is transferred? The data is transferred using which object? Model objects. Then view part. View part means what? Presentation. That model object we need to give to the browser. How we are giving the browser using JSP code. JSQL you're writing the C colon for each and the data, right? Like that we'll use the view part. The third one is what? Controller part. Controller part we'll talk about what? Application flow. So from request from which place to which place who will control the complete application will be controller, right? Controller will take care about the complete application flow. Because you got the point, right? That is called model view. Tell me guys, model view controller, right? Exactly. Okay, see here, if you take the if you take the application, so let me take the paintbrush. Web application architecture, client server database required definitely. Because definitely the first one is what my client. This is my client. Guys, this is my what client, right? Yes. Yes, client means what, who sends the request and who takes the response is called client, right? Yes. Yes, tell me what is a client. Client means what, who takes the uh, who sends the request and takes the response, right? He is basically client. He is a client. In the client, what we will do, we will type the URL, right? This is the URL pattern. Observe carefully, flow, application flow important. Because here we type the URL is what? Something like URL, www.fb.com, something like URL you are typing, right? So when you type the URL, just you can take the username. You can enter the username until me. So this is username, next one is what? Password, right? Yeah, username and password you will enter. So when you enter the username, password, yeah, username and what password. So good, this is like username and password, yeah. Username definitely contains one text box, password also definitely contains one text box, right? Yes. Okay, this is my username, you enter some data here, and password also you enter some data, right? Yes, password also you enter what, some data, right? Exactly. Yes, that is username and password, right? Yeah. Yes, username password, after entering we need to click on the button that is called login button, right? So you enter the login button. When you enter the login button, then guys, the request goes to the request goes to, okay, see wait, this is my client. Client means what? What is a client? Client means what, who sends the request and what takes the who sends the request and takes the response, like hold the response. It's called client. Okay, this is called client. Example what, all browsers are used to send a request, right? So all browsers are examples of clients. It's called client case. Who sends the request, take the response. In Spring MVC, we are talking. In Spring MVC, assume like this is my server. This is my server. I written the component of the server. This is my server actually. Okay. When the request goes to server, this is called what? Server, right? Yes. This is called server. If you request goes to server, then what happened? Yeah. Okay, this is my what am I? Server, right? This is my server basically. When the request goes server, who will take the request in MVC design pattern means we have one component like friend controller. What the controller name, guys? Friend controller. He is a friend controller who takes the request first of all. Yes, in Spring MVC, when the client sends the request, who will take the request? The request is taken by friend controller. He is the responsible person for everything. Is the friend controller, right? Exactly. Because the name is what, this is called a friend controller, right? This is called what? Friend controller. The friend controller is responsible to take the request, guys. To take what request, right? The friend controller is responsible to take the request. There's a point. This is my friend controller we got. Okay, fine. Okay, this is a friend controller. The friend controller will take what request, right? Yeah, it's a friend controller will take the request, guys. Very good. Friend controller. The friend controller, what we will use one servlet basically, that is called dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher. mm, yeah, dispatcher servlet, right? It is the friend controller, like dispatcher servlet we will use. Okay, when the client sends a request, who will take the request, guys? Friend controller will take the request. Friend controller, who is the friend controller here? Dispatcher servlet, right? Dispatcher servlet is act as a friend controller. Dispatcher servlet is a predefined class. It's a completely servlet based. It's a predefined class. The servlet based, right? Dispatcher servlet basically. So when the request comes to the browser, the request is taken by front controller. Then front controller will forward the request to the controller. Front controller will forward the request to what corresponding the controller. We have the multiple controllers. Depends on the request coming. The front controller will take the data, forward the request to what corresponding controller, right? Corresponding what controller or not. That's the point, guys. So then request goes to what controller, right? Exactly. Okay, so here let me take the controller. Okay, this is just like in the restaurant. When you go for the restaurant, then what you will do? If you go to some next restaurant, who will receive? The manager will receive the what customers, right? This is called front controller, guys. The manager will receive the customers. They're saying that go to the table, go to these tables, right? Exactly. Once the front controller will take the request and he will take the order, right? He will take what? Order. When he will take the order, then what he will do? He will assign that work to the some what? Service boy, right? Some service boy is getting the request. That is called controller, guys. That is called what controller, right? Yeah. So manager will take the request, then he given the request to what service boy. He is nothing but a controller. He is what control, because service boy only controller, right? Because he will take the request from the manager and he go to the kitchen and give the information to the kitchen. The kitchen what they prepared, he will take the service boy only. Service boy only will service to the client, right? The same way. Who is the friend controller, guys? Here manager is a friend controller. Manager is the friend controller, that is called dispatcher subletter. Okay, then the request goes to, tell me, the request goes to what? This is called request. So when the client sends the request to server, the dispatcher servlet will take the request and it will forward that request to the appropriate controller. Okay, because we have the service boys, one people, multiple people, multiple peoples. He will ask to specific person, right? The manager will tell you the specific person. Then friend controller is there, right? This is called controller, guys. Wait, this is called what? Controller, right? Yeah. This is a called controller. As controller, this contains like request mapping and all. Request mapping. It contains like request mapping, at the rate request mapping. So request mapping here he have the request like some like request methods. Assume like test method is there. Okay, good. So the request comes to the front controller to what controller. The controller we have the request mapping. The request mapping corresponding methods are there. Those methods will execute actually. But the front controller, we have the test, right? Then actually the front controller itself can give some response. Controller itself can give some response, right? See, for example, I asked water bottle. Then the request goes to manager. The manager said like, what you can say, service boy. Service boy will go to the kitchen and directly take the water bottle and give to the client. Directly take the water bottle and give to the client. It means who is giving the response here? Controller. Who is giving the response controller. It means controller can give the mm, controller can give the response to what client, directly can give the response to what client, right? Is one thing. Sometimes I added biryani. I added biryani means what? The controller can give directly response. No, then what he will do? He will interact with the, tell me here, he'll interact with what? Service layer. It means you don't write logics here. Who written the logics? He is also controller only. He is also what? Controller, right? Yeah, how many controllers total here? Two people. One is a big manager, one is a service boy. Sir, no. Then here, I asked biryani. Then control will prepare, give the response. No. What he will do? He will ask, he will go to the kitchen, right? There is called service layer. There is called what? Service layer, right? Because kitchen only will provide the services, right? Yes. This is called which one? Service layer. Exactly. I think you feel the flow, right? Yes. This is called what? Service layer. Okay, service layer, right? Yeah, I'm sending the request, then request goes to what service layer. Service layer, here we have a logic, right? Main logics are there. What main logics are? Like login check. Okay, check the data, check data, something like this, right? These are my logics. Check data, and we can write the num1 plus num2, right? Like a plus b plus, like this one. Exactly. Got the point? Yes. On service layer, first one request goes to what? Front controller. Front controller, give the request to the controller. But first time he is asking water bottle. Water bottle means controller itself is giving the response back to the client. Is going to any kitchen? No. Then I ordered biryani. Then I give order to the friend controller. Friend controller forwarded the request to the appropriate controller because we have one service boy and multiple service boys. Then he went to the kitchen. In the kitchen, food is prepared. Food is prepared. Food is what? Prepared, right? Yeah. Food is prepared. Then controller will take that food. Controller will take that food and give it to the manager. Manager will serve the food to the client. So, the second flavor. First flavor, controller is giving the water bottle. Second flavor is what? Biryani. You go to the kitchen. Kitchen prepared services like logics they prepared. Then he give it to the controller. Controller will give it to the friend controller. Friend controller give it to the client. Who is the finally ultimate? What we can say? Controller, friend controller, right? Who is ultimate person? Yeah, friend controller. Everything goes from the friend controller coming back to the friend controller only. Who will manage the application flow? Friend controller. Who will manage the application flow? Friend controller. He is only taking the request, give it to the controller. Controller give it to the service. Service back to the controller. Controller back to the friend controller. Friend controller back to the like that the flow. You got the point, huh? That is information. Huh? Very good information. Two flavors clear. Huh? One more flavor is there. The third flavor is that I ask like friend controller, I manager, I want live fish curry. I want a live fish curry. You want live fish curry means what he will do? He tell to the controller. Hey controller, the client required the live fish curry or live chicken curry. So yeah, then he given the information to service boys. In service boy, they have the already items, but they don't have live fishes, right? Sarma, they will take the live fishes from what? What we can say database. They will go to the farm and they has to pick the fishes and all, right? Yeah. So you got the point. That is called repository layer. What layer, ma? Repository layer. Repository. Repository is nothing but storage. Okay, this is repository layer, guys. This repository layer interacting the database. Interacting with what? Database, right? Exactly. So this is called repository layer. This is what layer here? Repository layer, right? Exactly. So the service kitchen people are asking like repository. Repository means it's like one kind of database, right? Yes, this is like database. This repository layer will pick the data from the database. We pick the data from what? Database, right? This is my database. You got the pointer? Yes. Then what is the situation? Tell me, guys. The service boy is asking like live fish. Live fish is asking from the repository people. The repositories are taking the data from what? Database. Yes. Taking the data from what? Database, right? Yes. This database contains fishes. This database contains what? Fishes, right? But here fishes are not important. Application flow important. Huh? So you thinking about the fish. Fish is okay. These are what fishes. Can you take some fishes? Yeah, these are fishes. Fishes. Fishes are fishes. 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 Fish is good, right? Yes. That's the data. Tell me, guys. I asked the control. I asked like live fish curry. I asked what live fish curry. Then he's tell to the controller. He's saying to what controller? Is saying to what controller. Controller is asking to tell me. Controller is asking to what? I'm sending to the controller, guys. I'm sending the controller. Once the controller is done, he's asking like kitchen people, service people. But service people, kitchen people, do have any live fishes? No. They need to ask what a repository. Repository they'll ask. Once repository is done, once repository is done, they'll ask like database. Then this database people will give the fishes to they'll give the fishes to what they'll give the fishes to again to the repository. The repository people give the data to service layer. The service people are will prepare the food, give it to the controller. Controller people will take the food from the service layer, and he given back to the front controller. The front controller will this is a front controller, right? Yes, the front controller will go for the hmm, appropriate view pages. Appropriate what? View pages. He requests like view pages, right? Nothing but he's taking appropriate spoons and all, appropriate spoons and tissues and all. Some controller is giving what? He's giving the spoons and tissues. No, he's giving only food. Only fish, right? Fish curry. Then what the front controller will do? Front controller will take that fish curry. Then he will take the appropriate spoons and appropriate tissues and appropriate cloths and all. And so he's giving the front controller will forward the request to what? JSP files. What files here? JSP. Now the JSP, the front control itself, the front control itself, he will take the appropriate JSP, appropriate what? JSP. Then tell me, the front control will take appropriate what? JSP. Mm, yeah, the front control will take the appropriate JSP file, either success or failure page. Success or what? Failure JSP, right? Yeah, because the success or failure JSP will not display to the client. The front controller will take the appropriate JSP files. Appropriate what? JSP file. He requested to the like cabin people. He want tissues and all back. Again, from the request comes from here itself. That's a point. Okay, clear? Yes. Tell me, guys. Now the situation is what? What is the situation? Yeah, this is the situation, right? Request goes from front controller to controller. If you are asking water bottle means service required or not required, water bottle is a basic point. Controller itself is giving the response. Control itself can give the response, but control is giving the response is good or not good, not good. If you take the if you take what, if you're asking biryani, you will interact with what? Kitchen people, service layer, the service layer. Then service layer itself is giving in response to what? Controller, controller to friend controller to client. So either control can generate some response, service layer can generate some response. But you're asking live fish curry. Live fish curry means service layer don't have live fishes. Then he interact with what? Database. We'll interact with database, right? Like repository. Repository means what? Repository is interact with database, right? Exactly. This layer is what? Repository layer. Right? This layer is called what? Repository, right? Yes. But this layer name is called repository layer, which is having the database logics. This layer is called what? Repository, right? Repository. And here we have the what logic? Normal business logic, database logic. Database logics to connect the database, right? Database what? Logics, right? Exactly. To connect it to what? Database. This is called mainly database. This is called what? Database, right? Exactly. Guys, are you clear, right? That is of application flow. What is the controller will do? What is the front controller will do? What is the processes happen internally? Are you clear now? Yes. Yes, that's the point, guys. Clear? This is called request or response back. Response. See, he requested again REQ REQ request. This is called request again. The request to this is also called what, guys? This is also called REQ. This is also request. Repository request to database. Database is giving what? Response. RES. The repository gives the response back to the service. Service is response back to the controller. Controller response back to the front controller. Front controller again requested data to what? View part. This is called which part, guys? Here view layer. This is called view layer, guys. Then based on the controller giving the response, he will take the appropriate spoons and the tissues. He send the request. What he sends the what request, right? Yes, he sends the request. Then success.jsp or failure.jsp, and is given back to what? Front controller. Back to front controller, right? This is like but you can say view part. Either you can write the success.jsp or what fail.jsp. That depends on the situation. Yes or not, there's a point. Then again the uh, response to the client. That is the application flow happen. That's all, guys. Diagram looks very nice, right? Uh, it's like restaurant. It's like restaurant. I asked to whom online people can understand, right? The flow. Online people are clear. We send a request to what manager. Hey manager, give me the water bottle. First case, give me the water bottle means what happened? Manager will ask the service boy, controller. Service boy is nothing but a controller. Then the controller will give the response back to the friend controller. Friend controller will back to the client. Second situation. What second situation? Tell me. Friend control. We are asking the biryani to the manager. Manager will take the service boy. Service boy goes to the kitchen. Service layer where the kitchen will provide the services, right? Kitchen will provide the services means kitchen will give the response back to the tell me here. Kitchen will give the response back to what? Controller. Controller to what? Friend controller. Friend controller to the client. At last one is what ask live fish curry. If you want live fish curry, then what happened here? Request goes to friend controller to controller, controller to service, service to repository, service to what? Repository. Yeah, service to what repository. The repository will take the fishes. Take what? These are the fishes, right? Yeah, give it to the service layer. Service layer prepare the kitchen, prepare the food and all. Response back to the controller, controller to the friend controller to the success.jsp views and all. Give the response back to the client, right? That is application flow, guys. Are you clear now? Yes, this is called MVC design pattern, guys. This is all about what? MVC. What MVC form, guys? Yeah, model view, and what? Controller, right? Model view and what? Controller, guys. That is a complete MVC architecture. Are you clear now? That is the application flow happen. This is called model view controller, right? Yes. Yeah, that is a flow, guys. Any questions? How the request is moving forward and coming backward, or clear, right? Yes. Guys, here we will use some annotation. This is a friend controller. Who is the friend controller, guys? Here, dispatches are related. To represent your class as a controller class, we require one annotation like at the rate controller annotation. What annotation, guys? At the rate controller annotation. To represent your class as a controller class. Friend controller, we need to configure, guys, using XML configuration. We need to configure the friend controller because he is the manager, right? So controller to represent your class is a controller. We require the class is what at the rate controller annotation. To represent your class is a service class. We require annotation is called at the rate service class. At the rate what? Service. To represent your class is a controller class at the rate controller. At the rate what? Next one is what? Service. Third one is to represent your class is a repository class. What class ma? Repository class. Repository annotation required. Annotation as repository annotation, right? There's three annotations we'll use basically. Very clear, right? So this is called controller class. This is called what? Service layer. This is called what? Repository layer. I'll make how many examples total here? Three examples. One example, controller is giving the response. This guy itself is giving the response. Basic hello world message. Second time, controller is not giving response. Controller is forward request to the service layer. Because don't write the logics in the controller, right? Don't write logics in what? Controller. He given to what? Service layer. Then service layer will do what? Service layer will process the logic, give a response back to the controller. Controller to what? Friend controller. Friend controller will identify the JSPs. We forward request to what? Corresponding client. Third example, we'll take the repository. We'll store the data into the database. We'll store the data into what? Database, right? That is called model view controller. Are you clear? Any questions? Any questions? Hmm. Diagram is very nice. In previous class also I prepared diagram, but not that much. This is the previous class I prepared. Kind request friend controller. Okay, fine. It's a Tomcat server, but this is not that much good, right? This is overview. Let me remove that. This is okay, right? What is showing that this is called browser request friend controller. Friend controller is DS, dispatcher sorter. Controller means what? All URL mappings. Controller will make the URL mappings. The request goes to service layer. Service contains what? All logics are present here. Then request goes to what? Repository layer. The data present in the database logics. The data present database logic, something like that. This is also okay, right? Yes. Because here the front controller, okay, service guy is giving some response that the controller. Controller is giving the name to the front controller. When the controller is giving the response back to the front controller, see the controller is giving the response like success amount. By default, when the controller is giving the response back to the front controller, when you give some message, by default that message is taken as a JSP file, view name. When the controller is giving the response back to the front controller, sir, controller is giving the response back to what? Front controller. The front controller will treat it as that response as a JSP name. The response has what? JSP name. Even if you give the response like success, but it's looking for what? Success.jsp. Yes, you got the point, right? Success.jsp. So the response is coming from the controller. The front controller will treat it as that is a JSP file name. The front controller will identify the particular JSP based on one class that is called internal resource view resolver, IRVR. Internal resource view resolver. This is a class. Based on this class, will identify the corresponding JSP file name. So you got the point, right? Whatever the response coming from the controller, front controller to front controller, the front controller will take the response. The response is treated as a JSP file name. JSP file name. How the front controller will identify the JSP file name? Based on how the front controller will identify the corresponding view name means because of this configurations. What configurations are? Internal resource view resolver. Internal resource what? View resolver. Based on this internal resource view resolver, it identifies the corresponding, it will pick the corresponding view name. It will pick a corresponding view name, give that view to the browser. Give that view to what? Browser. Yes, here we need to configure the XML configuration two files. What are the two files? Dispatches or we have to configure. Front controller we have to configure. Yes, how many classes you have to configure? Two classes. What are two classes? Tell me. Dispatcher servlet we need to configure, and internal resource we resolver also we have to configure. These two classes we have to configure. One is a front controller, controlling the complete application flow. Request goes from the front controller, response back from the front controller. One class. Another class is what? Internal resource view resolver. Why this class internal resource view resolver? To identify the particular JSP name, to identify the particular JSP name, right? That is all. This is also bit diagram, right? Good diagram, right? Sir, no, yes. This is a bit important, but this is very important, right? Yes, sir, no. Patience, yeah, about the patience. This is the prepared in the class, normal class. But this class I'll upload in YouTube, right? That's what diagram becomes big. Diagram becomes what? Big. I think you got the clarity about this complete application flow. Yes. Guys, this is like a request again, REQ. This is like request REQ. Yes. This is like request REQ. This is like, again, what a response, right? How this request and response will be, how it identify the particular view name, internal, internal resource view resolver, IRVR. Based on this IRVR, internal resource what? View resolver, it will pick the corresponding view name. It will pick the corresponding what? View name, right? IRVR. And that is the application flow happening. Front controller, service layer, repository layer. Yeah. Who is the main person here? Front controller is the main person. Controller, what it will do? It contains only URL mappings. That's what request mapping I written. That nothing URL mappings. slash test, I written the URL, right? It's the URLs. He will give that data to corresponding services. Service layer only contains the logics here. Tell me, based on this one, you can understand that front controller is a manager. He will complete application flow because we have the one controller, multiple controllers, multiple controllers. In that case, front controller is the main person. He'll dispatch the request to the specific controller. We'll dispatch the request to what? Specific controller, right? Exactly. Yes, yes or no? Dispatch has already handled the HTTP request and response. Dispatch the request. Yes, read this point once. Yeah. In Spring MVC, we'll work around the dispatch servlet. We understood dispatch work around what dispatch servlet. Dispatch servlet handle all the HTTP requests and responses. Dispatch the request to the handlers, nothing but controllers. It dispatch the request to what handlers. It uses at the rate controller and request mapping as a default request handlers. My request handlers nothing. It dispatches the request to the handler, nothing but controller class contains the methods, right? Controller class contains what? Methods. That is nothing but the request handlers. One method is handling request, na? That is called request handlers. Request handlers. The name itself is saying request handlers. Who will handle the request methods? What method? That method is there in the controller class. That method is there in what controller class, right? Exactly. At the rate controller annotation defines that particular class is a controller class. Okay. To represent your method is a request method. To represent your method is what? Request method. Request mapping annotation required. Request mapping annotation, right? Exactly. Okay, this is also friend controller. Yeah. Because I think you feel that complete. This is MVC architecture, right? You feel the complete flow. What the advantage here? There are multiple advantages, right? Because controller layer separate, service layer separate, reservoir layer separate, application clear separation between the data, right? Clear separation. So you guys, clear separation of roles. Clear separation of what? Roles, right? Exactly. Clear separation. First one is what? Clear separation of roles. First rule. The Spring is separates the rules to fulfill the specialized object. The rules like controller part, service layer, view resolver, validators. Some separate rules are there, right? Exactly. A lightweight. So the container uses for development deployment to use the lightweight servlets because dispatch already is there now. So it's lightweight application. Fast development, right? Because we can have a parallel development. Repository layer can be done by one people. Service layer can be done by another persons. Fast development, right? Strong and powerful configurations. We need to configure data. Flexible and model transfer. Model transfer. So yes, flexible and model transfer in the sense controller is giving one object need to display. Controller need to give some object to display. See, I have the object. The object contains location of the shop, total amount of the today. That is the data. The data is coming in which format? Guess what the intention is. Service layer execute the data. Service layer execute data. He is giving the shop name, shop location, total amount today. Total how many fields are there? Three fields. The three fields he need to display it in the browser. That the three fields he need to display in the browser means he will make the three fields into a object. That is called model. Guys, he'll make the three fields into what? Object. Then that data goes to controller. That object goes to controller. That object goes to what? Controller. Controller give it to the front controller. Front controller give that object to the JSP view part. Here we will populate the data. Here we will populate the data. I told you that shop name, location, car, total amount is there. No? We are making object, right? That object is transferred in the form of the model object. That object is transferred in the form of what? Model, right? Think that when I said model, nothing but okay, Sara is transferring one object data. Have the three values, right? Three values means how can you do that? Three values means I cannot make the string array. Instead of making the string array, I'll make object. I'll transfer the object. I'll transfer what? Object, right? I will transfer what am object, right? Flexible model transfer. Nothing but model is nothing but what? Data transfer. We flexible what? Data transfer, right? That's what guys here if you see I return the data like model. Model is nothing but what? Okay, we understand that controller is giving one object to the front controller. Front controller is giving that object to what? A view. Here we need to populate that object data. Maybe single employee object we need to populate using JSTL tags. Is given a list of employees. You need to populate using what? For each data, right? Like that. We application flow is clearer. Like that it is happening. Yes. How the data is transferred among the data is transferred between the layers using which one model, using what model, that model comes to which place JSP place, that view part will process the model data, give it to the front control give the response. Sir, yes. Now here who is the main hero? Front controller only. Who is the main person of internal, right? Exactly. That's what the advantage of this one, clear separation of what roles, lightweight framework, fast development, strong and powerful configurations we have, flexible data transfer, model transfer, business code, easy testing because you can test the module by module, service layer you can test, repository layer, so easy testing, mapping amount, so easily you can map because we have the multiple layers, right? Easily it provide the flexible mapping that allows the page to redirect easily. With mapping is a dependency injection, wherever you need inversion of control, dependency injection allows the developer not to create the company different dependencies. Fine, dependency injection is good, right? Exactly. Guys, are you clear now? That is the advantage of what MVC. Hmm? Yeah. Any questions? If the data is transferred in the form of what view. The object is nothing but what view, right? Yeah. The theory is there in the here. Just I will share this data. Just you can check it. Read this point here. This is a high level diagram. Who is series diagram? HTTP request. HTTP request goes to dispatch servlet. Which one? First one is what? Handler mapping. Who is handler mapping? Handler mapping. Based on this handler mapping, front dispatcher is a front controller. Front controller take the request, and we have one controller, multiple controllers. The handler mapping will identify the particular controller. What's the purpose of handler mapping? Handler mapping. Yes, you got the point, right? Identify the particular controller. So handler mapping will identify the controller. See, here written only controller here. There is no service layer and all because the controller need to interact with what service layer. Service layer need to interact with what repository layer. That is a controller responsibility. Yes, sir, no, yeah. We understood the point. Sir, here there is no service layer. Why, sir? Because controller is responsible for the remaining process. Yes, sir, no. There is a point. The request comes to the dispatcher solid. Dispatcher solid will identify the particular controller based on what handler mapping. Based on the handler mapping, the dispatcher servlet identify the controller. Then controller to service, service to repository, that is taken by controller. Finally, controller to what? Service, service to repository. Again, response back from the repository to the service, service to the controller. That's what here. Here the controller is nothing but the complete process. Then controller got the response. The controller gives the response back to what? Dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher solid identify the what view resolvers. Based on the view resolver, identify the view name. That request sent to the view name. Request sent to what? View name. Then we give the response, right? Exactly. Guys, see if you clearly observe one more time, the request comes to what dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will identify the particular controller based on the handler mapping. Second step is identified based on the first step. Because we have one controller, multiple controllers are. How it will identify the particular controller means based on what handler mapping. Tell me guys, what the purpose of handler mapping? Handler mapping will identify the particular controller. Then controller to service, service to repository, repository back to service, back to the controller. Completely logics are done, controller done, completed task. Controller got some response. Controller will identify the view based on the view resolver. Second step is done based on the first step. Fourth step is done based on what? Third step. That is only thing. Dispatcher servlet will identify the controller based on what handler mapping. Then controller got some response. So based on the services, based on the repository, whatever it may be, controller got the response. Then controller will identifies the dispatcher servlet will identify front controller. Sorry, front controller will identify the corresponding view based on what view resolver. That is the only point. Second step is done based on what the first step. Fourth step is done based on what view resolvers. High level diagram. You got the point, huh? That is the point. Dispatch is only main point here. Clear, right? Controller, how it in handler mapping. Handler mapping will identify the. Let me guess. Handler mapping only identify the controller. Controller take layer to what? Service layer. Service layer to what? Series one request comes to what? Dispatches are late. Dispatches are late to handler mapping. Handler mapping identify the choose the handler, corresponding handler. Choosing a corresponding handler, right? Exactly. Because corresponding handler, controller can interact. See, the controller itself is gives some response. You got the point, right? Controller can interact with what? Service layer, repository layer, database. Execute the business logics. Controller can interact with what? Service layer, business logic, repository layer, data access logics, database layer. Then back to the, then controller got the view name, right? Yes or no? Controller executing all the logics. After executing all the logics, then what happened? Tell me. To identify the view name. This view name given to the handler adapter. Handler adapter to what? Dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet based on this view name. This view name. I told you. Controller whatever the name given that is taken as by default view name. It's not like message. It is not taking like what message. It is taking like what view name. It's taking like a view name. That's what controller whatever the message given that's taken as a view name. That view name is taken by handler adapter. Give to the dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will send to the request to what view resolver. View name is there na. That view name is given to view resolver. View resolver what resolve the view. Resolve the view. Identify the view. Then dispatcher servlet generate what response. Okay, see here. Controller directly model is there. Directly processing is there. Sometimes controller can generate directly response. By seeing the diagram, just to try to understand how the flow it will happen, right? Very clear? Huh? When you see the 2-3 diagrams, you'll get some idea, complete idea about the flow. Clear? Huh? That is called your what am I? MVC design pattern. Any questions about this flow? Who is the front controller here? Dispatcher servlet. Who is the main person here? Dispatcher servlet. Are you clear now? Dispatcher servlet is the main person, right? Yeah. And how the data will be transferred based on which object? Model object. Controller to the viewport model object is there, no? Yes. How the dispatcher servlet will identify the view? How the dispatcher servlet identify the view name? Based on what? Internal resource view resolver. Internal resource what? View resolvers. That is the flow. Any questions? Online people, any questions, please? Yeah, we got this. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Any questions, please? Diagram is clear, right? That's what we're done with the application flow, guys. Next video, next class, we'll go for the application, how to make the application. Okay, depends on this one. Total, how many flavors I told you? Three flavors. Flavor one is what? Example one, controller directly giving the response to browser. First one. Second one is what? Example two, giving the response as a JSP file in the view folder. Get the point, right? Third one is what? The service layer working with what? Repository layer. Hmm. I'll make the applications. You'll get the clarity about that. Yeah, thank you guys. Like the video, comment the video, subscribe to our channel to get the more videos. Hmm? Bye guys. Online people join one more time.